Really just about what he's done. I think coming out of spring training, some specific challenges and goals put in front of him. He's attacked those. He's been building up his volume while he's been attacking the development goals. We're seeing improved pitch quality and also separation of the pitch qualities. The performance, obviously, as you can see, has been there consistently and been really, really strong. He's been getting both sides out, left and right, handling all the other things that come in the game. Obviously on the roster already, and we felt like this was the time to give him an opportunity, and he's earned that and deserves it. And it was a good opportunity for Carmen to go down and keep working on some stuff.
Whenever you look at just the amount of pitching that you do have in Indianapolis that could be here in this year, next year, how do you determine who gets the opportunities, what maybe the opportunity in the majors is, starter, reliever, everything that goes through?
Yeah, we feel very good about that group of young pitching, that most of which is in Indy, and some of which has touched the big leagues this year, and Burroughs now will tonight, but you can go to certainly Ashcraft and Marco, and Burroughs now here, and Chandler, Harrington, Baczynski now, in AAA, and there are others. But if you just think about that group, that's a group of young starting pitchers who we believe either already have contributed to the Pirates in 2025, or we hope will in 2025, and hopefully meaningfully with all those guys. In terms of what the timing is and when it happens, it's really case by case, and there's a number of variables that go into each decision. There is a timing element is one of them, who's on the roster, who's not, et cetera. That kind of thing is one element. It's not the only one. Certainly the performance is a piece of it, how they're getting to the performance, the total, sort of total volume for the year that we want to see with each guy is another piece of it. So a number of things go into it, but our hope is that all of those guys I mentioned are in a position to help us win games in 2025.
With Carmen, is there a chance we see him used as a reliever, or is he just a full-time starter now?
The conversation we had with him when we optioned him was that he's going down to start, and we expect that he'll start tomorrow for Indy. And right now, that'll be the focus. That'll be the role. He's, as we've talked about before, he had been advocating for himself for a couple of years now, and convinced us at the end of last season that he was prepared to do the work necessary in the offseason to give himself a chance to do that. We wanted to give him that opportunity. We felt like he did that coming into spring training. Felt like he earned that spot, and he's done some good things in the big leagues. He's had some starts where he's helped us stay in a game or win a game, and then he's had some other starts where he's had a couple hiccups. So I think he's learned from that. I think we've learned from it. We want to keep that going. Down the road, there's always scenarios where we might ask anybody to do something differently to help us win, but we want to exhaust the starting possibility if we can.
So you feel that's his greatest value to the organization, is him being a starter?
Today.
How close is Bubba to earning the opportunity that Burroughs is getting tonight?
I missed the first
Bubba, how close is Bubba to getting the opportunity that Burroughs?
Yeah, I think just as I said, I think that whole group of pitchers that I mentioned, we've got our eyes on all of them, and the hope is that there's a spot for all those guys I mentioned to come and contribute in 2025, and there's no guarantee of it, but we hope that that's the case. And it's just I wouldn't want to speculate as to when. It's going to be different for each guy. I think in Bubba's case specifically, certainly he's performing well, and we're seeing the pitches that are getting AAA hitters out. Everybody can see that, and I think we want to see him continue to challenge himself. And I think with all those guys, really the message is that treat it like a major league game, even though you're in AAA. This is think about this being a game against major league hitters, even though it's a AAA game, and keep yourself at that standard. And he's responded to that, and so we'll see. Again, we're hopeful that he's in a position to help us win games this year.
When you have a player like Bubba who's really dominated that level, do you feel like it sends kind of a mixed message to him where you're asking him to achieve so many things. He's checking, at least on the outside, a ton of boxes, but other guys are getting opportunities to start games before him.
Well, I mean, Michael Burrows has checked all those boxes too,
Yeah.
right? And he's performed really well. I think Michael has earned this opportunity. And I don't personally think that, I think all those guys I mentioned would want to be in the major leagues for sure. Absolutely. Of course, they all want to be in the major leagues and, you know, and are trying to force their way into that. No question about that. But I personally would doubt that they're, you know, I would doubt that, like, the fact that one of their teammates gets called up comes into play for them in terms of how they feel about that. I would expect they'll rally around Michael Burrows and be excited about Michael Burrows coming up and getting this chance tonight.
Not just necessarily Burrows, but I mean, Carmen gets the rotation spot, Thomas Harrington gets the opportunity. It just seems like there's been a lot of people who have been considered for a rotation spot ahead of Bubba this year.
Well, again, they're different. There's lots of things that go into all those decisions, right? Like
Yeah.
if we go back to spring training, and we revisit the conversation we had about all those guys, there were guys coming into spring training we knew that were going to be built up in a different way and be more likely candidates to take starts early in the season. And Majinski and Harrington were two of those guys. And there were other guys who were going to go slower with, and Chandler was in that category. There are reasons for all of that, right? So there's certain points in the season where that it's not really an apples to apples comparison. And again, being on the roster is one thing. You know, there's a lot that goes into it. But what I would emphasize is that, you know, we're fortunate to have that group of young pitchers. Believe all of them are going to help us win games. We hope it all happens in 2025.
Ben, is that something you envisioned when you drafted a lot of these guys in high rounds early in your tenure here as the general manager, that you invested in starting pitching and now they're kind of all coming up at the same time? Were you hoping to have maybe a homegrown starting rotation at some point?
Pitching's really important, so we know we have to be good at evaluating it and acquiring it, developing it. Obviously, we got to be good at that to have a chance to win. And we're excited to see some of the fruits of that labor, you know, starting to show up. Certainly not satisfied. You know, we've got to keep the pedal down, and clearly there's room to improve at the major league level in our pitching performance. We know that, so we're hopeful that some of those young guys will be a part of that, you know, this year even, and certainly beyond. So excited about some of the progress we've made in the pitching front. Not satisfied at all, and it's certainly not a choice between pitching and position players. We need both, very clearly, and you know, so we're very focused on both of those things, trying to hold ourselves to a higher standard in both of those areas. And it's not that we chose to take a path down, let's sell out to pitching. We gotta have both. To some extent, we've just had a little more success on the pitching front, and we've got to do that on the position player front.
Ben,
To circle back to what you were talking about on the volume buildup. How do you go about choosing which guys you're going to slowly build volume for? Because it looks like that was with Burrows and Bubba this year, where Harrington was clearly ready.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
how do you choose which guys?
Primarily history. It's not only history. History of where they're coming from in terms of their volume, age, you know, volume history over time, not just like the previous year, but over several years. Where are they physically? Health history, what are they coming off of, et cetera. Delivery, there's a number of elements that go into it. Coming to spring training, I think that in Carmen's case, he's just a little further ahead in his career, and we chose to give him an opportunity to prove that he could start. Well, you got to build him up to do that, so he was given that opportunity in spring training. In Harrington's case, he's a college pitcher. It's been a pretty steady development track through the minor leagues. We felt he was in a position to add to that volume in 2025. We felt like he was in a position to sort of build up fairly regularly in spring training. In Burrow's case, he's coming off a shortened season and, you know, missing the time from Tommy John, and, you know, we're not going to go to 0 to 100 in 1 year, so we chose a little bit slower. In Chandler's case, he's really young, and he's only he'd only been a full-time starter for basically 2 years coming into this spring training. And again, we're trying to anticipate a full season for him. What's that gonna look like? So we chose to go slower.
But Ben, to follow up sort of on your answer to Kevin's question, you know, you talked about you guys have had success identifying pitching and developing it, but, you know, given why has there been such a gap then, you know, in terms of perception or potential from position players? Because, like, given where you guys are at offensively, you would think if there were guys in Indy that would have opportunities to contribute, and yet that's really not happening. And it seems maybe because you guys feel they aren't ready. So why has it been such a struggle to develop position players versus the successes that you have had with the
Yeah,
pitching?
I mean, we're digging into that every single day, you know, and you know, like, look, we know that there can be a lag between the work we're doing and the results. So, you know, I've said before, I'll say again, I'm very confident in the people and the effort that is going toward our assessment of hitters, our development of hitters, the environment we're creating around hitters. There's a ton of focus and energy from very talented people, both in evaluation and development. We're seeing some signs of progress. We need more, no question about it. And, you know, you referenced it, like, we want guys from AAA to, like, you know, pound the door down. that will be good. Still think that can happen this year. We want more of it over time, and there's opportunity there. So yeah, we have to stay focused on it, and you know, everybody knows we've got to score more runs, and that's not going to happen just by saying it and hoping for it. You got to do the work to do it.
How do you find the balance between giving young players opportunity, both minor league and major league level, and giving veterans opportunities to improve how they've done so far this year?
Yeah, the balance of that. Yeah, it's just that. It's a balance. You know, like, you know, I think that the game is not played in small samples. We all know that, and it's not an easy game to play. And you know, really respect the job of the major league player and how challenging that is. And part of that respect is, you know, doing everything we can to provide enough runway for guys to work through stuff and get to where they have been in the past, or get to where we think they're capable of. If you have someone in the organization who's beating the door down and telling everybody that absolutely, you know, they're a better alternative, well then, of course, you gotta keep your eyes open to that. So it's a balance between those two things. And I think that balance can shift as you get deeper into the season. You know, we're still in May. You know, everybody knows we gotta get better. Everybody's focused on that.
Yesterday, we learned that Jared underwent surgery, but not all the details were made available. Do you have any more details on exactly what was done to his elbow?
Yeah, he had procedure that's referred to as a revision surgery, or in some cases, the term internal brace is used out there. And the distinction basically is that the procedure he had is a revision or a repair to that elbow, as opposed to a reconstruction. A full reconstruction comes with a little bit longer, typically a little bit longer recovery time. The revision or the internal brace procedure that he had typically comes a little bit shorter. It's still significant, obviously, but our hope, certainly, if the recovery goes the way we anticipate it going, and believe strongly he's going to dominate the rehab, it puts 2026, you know, more confidently in play. Certainly, that's the outcome we hope for. So, in terms of how we got there, there was a lot of conversation between Jared's representatives at CAA, the Pirates, and Dr. Meister. And these conversations were happening over a period of days as he prepared to go back to Dr. Meister to visit Dr. Meister, and then during the time he was there. So we had a lot of information. Dr. Meister obviously is an expert in this field. He's performed a lot of these surgeries, both full reconstructions and also the one with the internal brace, the revision. He was confident that Jared was a strong candidate for the revision. And he also said that I wanna get in there, ideally I'd get in there before I made a final decision. And ultimately Jared chose to give him permission to do that, to allow that to be a decision, at the time of surgery, so that's what happened.
Did Jared's injury factor into the decision at all to send Carmen down as a starter as opposed to maybe sliding him back into the big league?
No, I don't think so. I think they were, totally unrelated. With Carmen, I just think again, we know he can do other things, and, it's always a possibility that we would ask pitchers to do other things for the team at some point if we really felt like this is gonna help us win games. We know Carmen's capable of doing that. We chose to give him a chance to start. He made 9 starts, I think. Again, some good ones, some good signs, some other hiccups. It's often the case that pitchers will benefit from that. Going back to, he's gotten a lot of feedback now as a starter in the major leagues. He's gonna go back to AAA, can use that feedback, make some adjustments. Let's see where that takes us. We can keep open all the possibilities down the road, but if he can succeed as a starter, and we think he can, then that's really valuable for the Pirates still, even in 2025, and we wanna keep going with that for a bit.
Ben, when I talked to Jared, Ben, when you say he's a candidate for the internal brace, does that mean there wasn't a complete tear? Was it a partial? I mean, why was he a candidate for internal brace as opposed to reconstruction?
Yep.
Was it a partial tear?
There's an injury. It was not look, part of the reason we got to this point is that it was not a black and white case. In spring training, it was not a black and white case, and at that time, through the conversation, again, the same parties were involved in the conversation at the time, including Dr. Meister. It was determined, and Dr. Meister felt confident that we should take a bet. We should make a bet on conservative care, rehab. Let's see if we can bring this back, because it was not a black and white case. There was an injury there, but it was not a black and white case. And unfortunately, although he made progress, as he got up to longer distances here in the last week or so, unfortunately some symptoms came back, and that was the signal for all of us that, okay, well, this didn't work the way we hoped it would, and so we gotta consider plan B.
For the braces, and I don't know how many cases there are of these, Ben, but I mean, is it more of a temporary fix over time and what the
No.
data says, or is it meant to be a permanent deal? And is there more of a propensity in the future of re-aggravation when you go this route?
Yeah, we wouldn't have gone down this course. Certainly don't think Dr. Meister would have recommended this course if there was anything temporary about it. We believe that this procedure was the right procedure for him, and gives him a chance to pitch successfully for a long time. We all know pitching, there's no forever guarantee with it. We know that with any pitcher, but I've certainly never heard that word temporary, to describe it. It's just 2 choices. The way I would look at it is, so there's less history with this procedure because it just hasn't been around for as long. So that, if you look at the data, there's just fewer examples, but to me, this is an example of medical innovation over time. This procedure was developed, it is slightly different. We now have, as an industry, more than one surgical way to solve this issue, whereas 10 years ago, we really didn't, and now we have more than one thing on the table, and in this case, one of the leading experts in the world felt strongly that that was the right choice for Jared.
What's made outcomes on people that have had this procedure, because it's, like you said, relatively new and.
Yeah, I don't have that in front of me. I know that through the conversation, it is a smaller sample for sure than the full reconstruction. Certainly there's tons of anecdotes of individual pitchers who have come back very successfully from it, and so, we have a good feeling about it.
Have you gotten a chance
that
to?
is different from the team since Donnie took over?
I think certainly our compete level has been there, but I think generally our compete level had been there. What I'm noticing more so is, probably just Donnie himself. That's probably what I'm focused on is Donnie himself and trying to help him in any way that we can. And 3 things that stand out. First of all, the decisions in the game. That's something a manager obviously has control over. I feel like he's made good decisions in the game. He's been prepared, made good decisions in the game, and certainly always been ready to review that after the game in a healthy way. You know, the second thing I would point to is just authenticity. I feel like he's been himself, and that's a really important trait for any leader, but not something you take for granted, because in a job like that, you know, it comes with pressure and there's a higher profile, and you know, so you want to see someone still be themselves, like, you know, appear to be themselves, be their authentic self, and I believe that's what we're seeing. I think we're seeing Donnie be Donnie, and that's a really good thing. And I think the third thing is just like the you know, sort of seeing how he's communicating inside the room and internally, and I can't share every detail of that, but I think he's doing a very effective job communicating with players and staff. There's been some changes, obviously, and he's been out front on that communication, and, you know, putting people first as you'd expect him to do. So, been very encouraged with how he's handled the job so far.
And the amateur physiologists say that Jared throws too hard, and that's why he broke down. When he comes back, can you really tell a guy to throttle down? Or, I mean that's his game, throwing, you know, high fastballs. I mean, is it even realistic to think you could ask him to change, or?
I don't think so specifically. I think the way we should be trying to do is help him throw really hard in the most protective way possible. You know, so you attack the physical part, the physical strength, the athleticism, the way he's moving, the delivery, his routine year-round. You know, you attack all the things around the velocity to protect him while he's trying to do that. I think it's a human being walks up on the mound and they know that they're capable of throwing hard, and they know that throwing hard gives them a better chance to get that hitter out. I'm not going to tell them not to do that.
And Henry Davis played what might have been one of his most complete games yesterday. You've talked in the past about how much he's improved defensively, but you're starting to see the bat come around. What does he have to do to earn more playing time, or maybe even equal playing time? Like, where do you have to see signs of improvement from Henry?
Yeah, I mean, certainly trust Donnie and the staff to make those decisions in terms of who's in the lineup every day, but I think it's just continuing to do what he's doing. You know, he's, as you mentioned, been very consistently solid defensively. Obviously, you know, he's settled into a routine with one starter at least, and not to say that that's a permanent thing or anything, but they've established a nice routine, and you can just see it in the game. You know, he's receiving, he's blocking, he's throwing. The game calling is something that none of us are as good at, like, measuring quantitatively, but subjectively, as we watch it, you know, feel like he's doing a good job with the game calling. So that's been there, and yeah, the bat. He's had a history of hitting. He just hasn't done it at the major league level yet. He's working really hard at that. It's not the easiest thing to do when you're not playing that often, but when he's getting in there, in my view, he's having tough at bats. He's giving himself a chance. He got some good outcomes yesterday, which is great to see. And yeah, I think he just has to continue to do what he's doing.
There's been some debate on. People have suggested that maybe you guys should consider trading Paul. I know you always talk about how you're always listening to any offer that comes in, or any, you know, your line's always open. But would you guys consider dealing Paul Skenes this season?
No, it's not at all part of the conversation.
Ben, you mentioned a little while ago that it's only May, but it's also by the end of the weekend you'll be basically a third of the way through the season. At what point in the season do the projections that you may have had in March give way to the reality of what you've seen over, like, how much of a sample size is big enough to sort of assess this is kind of, you know, for 2025 sort of where we're at?
Well, we have a big enough sample to tell us a lot about, you know, where we are and how we played, and it's not good enough. So we have enough already to say that whatever our forecast was in spring training has changed based on what's happened. Now, what's also true though is we believe we can and will play a lot better. And and that's our focus. Like, whatever has happened and whatever that means for this preseason forecast is what it is. And we can play better, and we believe we will, and that's our entire focus. And I think, you know, it's not, I'm not giving you the sort of full answer you're looking for, but I am giving you the truth, which is how we're thinking about it, which is just, we just gotta get better. Let's play better baseball. And that's gonna lead to winning more games, and then let's wake up and see where that takes us when we get to July.